I found myself staring into a whirlwind of medical complications in late 2010. At the time, none of us could have predicted how those events would become a profound journey that altered my understanding of life, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. I was already living with complex autoimmune conditions that affected multiple organs. My lungs and kidneys were in a precarious state, but the major issue came when I was administered a medication that, under normal circumstances, could have been innocuous. Instead, it directly taxed my already vulnerable liver, setting off a domino effect within my body. That event triggered a near-complete shutdown of organ systems and led to a severe fall, which caused a traumatic brain injury. Because of that chain reaction, I slipped into a coma and was rushed by helicopter to a major medical center. According to the physician notes, there was virtually no hope for me. Yet as modern science fought to keep me alive, I underwent a near-death experience that redefined everything I thought I knew about existence. What follows is an account of that journey, fleshed out in a step-by-step narrative, including all the subtle moments of revelation, the spiritual behind-the-scenes intricacies, and the best practices that guided my return to a fully functioning life. 1. The slow trajectory toward crisis. Before diving into the heart of the near-death experience, it's vital to rewind the clock a bit. I'd been coping with layers of autoimmune dysfunction for years. Like many who wrestle with chronic illness, I rolled through cycles of relative stability and moments of sudden downturn. My lungs often felt as if they anchored me to a never-ending fatigue, while my kidneys required ongoing vigilance in terms of hydration and medication. Specialists had administered various treatments to manage these conditions. Then came the fateful introduction of a new medication, the latest trend in combating my autoimmune issues. That drug was intended to improve my situation, but nobody realized how severely my liver would react. It was like watching a domino chain cascade. Once my liver was compromised, nothing else seemed to function properly. The medical staff described it as a full-body meltdown. I lost consciousness, experienced a fall in the hospital corridor that damaged my head, and from there, I remember only flashes of blurred images and frantic voices. 2. Plunging into coma and beyond. According to my medical records, after the traumatic brain injury, I slipped into a coma. My condition was dire enough that I was quickly transferred to a more sophisticated facility. Emergency responders placed me gently into a helicopter, sealed the doors, and took off. From an outsider's perspective, it was a race against time. Internally, everything shifted into a surreal domain. There's a perplexing moment when your mind begins to detach from sensory input. At first, a sense of confusion reigned. It felt like a lucid dream 101 tutorial, an odd in-between space where I recognized scenes but couldn't tether them to reality. I sensed my own body from a distance, as if I was perched near the corner of the underground station of consciousness. On one hand, I was aware of the seriousness of my condition. On the other, an overwhelming tug pulled me somewhere else, a realm that was nothing like the rational environment I had known all my life. 3. First glimpse of the other side. Sometimes, people who've gone through near-death experiences talk about a tunnel or a corridor of light. In my case, it was as if I ascended swiftly above the atmosphere. Hospital walls and mechanical beeping disappeared, replaced by an incredibly vast and star-filled expanse. How is this real? I remember thinking. My vantage shifted from my inert physical form to a sense of limitless awareness. The cosmic setting offered no typical directional references, no up, no down, just a swirl of luminous presence that beckoned me forward. Rather than the typical white light people mention, I encountered a triad of shimmering tones, one closest to a deep ruby glow, another reminiscent of a purple amethyst, and a third exuding a radiant emerald hue. These swirling orbs caught me in an instant embrace. Although I had never seen them in everyday life, they felt intimately familiar, like fragments of a cosmic family waiting patiently for my arrival. 4. A reunion of light beings. This trifecta of colored lights radiated what I can only describe as the purest form of acceptance. Communication arrived as vibrations, pulses that rippled through me, subtly passing knowledge directly into my awareness. If I had to package it into a how-to or step-by-step explanation, I would say, first, you sense the frequency, then you interpret it as immediate understanding. There were no syllables or spoken declarations. Instead, it seemed like a direct alignment of consciousness. There was a sense of my own identity fused with an unconditional love emanating from these lights. More astonishingly, I felt recognized, seen from the inside out. If you've ever glimpsed a viral hack explaining how to feel comfortable in a group setting, imagine that times 1,000. This was spiritual recognition so profound that any lingering traces of loneliness or unworthiness just disintegrated. 5. Expanding into celestial choirs. When the initial amazement wore off, I began noticing a teeming abundance of colors and vibrations around me. It was like stepping into a boundless festival where every hue danced and sang. Some waves of color glided close, merging with my own field of awareness, then gliding away again. If on Earth we rely on speech, here you transmitted your thoughts through energetic signatures. It's as if your entire being resonated, sending or receiving knowledge in one fluid instant. Over there, time as we know it simply didn't exist. Yet, from the perspective of the hospital staff, nearly 3.5 days passed while I lay in that comatose state. From my vantage, the experience seemed both timeless and superabundant, an eternity that somehow compressed into a fraction of a second. 6. Being without a body. One profound realization surfaced the moment I tried to locate my limbs. I had none. Or, if you prefer a more precise description, I was composed of a luminous, shapeless essence. Occasionally, a swirl of lights would form around me, bringing a sense of arms or hands, but that was more of a passing impression than an actual physical shape. The best practices for astral travel or visionary meditation often instruct you to imagine a subtle body, but in this realm, I was formless. I was also not worried. That is a crucial distinction. On Earth, we tend to anchor identity to our physical shape. Here, the concept of needing shape never even crossed my mind. Instead, I was thoroughly engrossed in a sublime sense of belonging. 7. The arrival of higher energies. Not long into this immersion, though using words like long is inaccurate since chronology was so different, I perceived more luminous entities. They glided in gracefully, and I recognized them as distinct from the triad that had greeted me. Their essence radiated a tone I can describe only as angelic, for lack of a better label. They felt like gracious caretakers. With great affection, they guided me gently, sharing expert tips for interpreting what I was experiencing. These beings communicated that I could remain in this realm for as long as I desired. There was no rush, no demands, no guilt or shame about life left behind. Everything felt supportive, almost like a cosmic tutorial, minus the formal lessons. 8. The choice to stay or return. As these angelic presences embraced me in their swirls of warmth, I wondered what would happen if I stayed. I was shown without spoken words that the decision was entirely mine. There was no "you must do this" decree. This total neutrality might be unnerving to some, because so many of us on Earth are conditioned to think of higher powers as either granting or denying permission. In this domain, it was pure freedom. If I wanted to stay, they would celebrate me. If I wanted to go back, they would honor that equally. This realization left me floating in a strange mixture of awe, relief, and curiosity. 9. Ebb and flow of understanding. Occasionally, I'd sense a faint pull toward my physical body. Echoes of my old life drifted up: family, friends, the burdens of illness that had been my day-to-day. The memory of that battered human form lingered somewhere in the background, faint but insistent. At the same time, the unconditional acceptance in this cosmic realm made me question why anyone would want to leave such perfection. One especially powerful wave of insight arrived when I recognized that in this dimension, language was entirely vibrational. The notion of awkward silences or searching for the right words simply didn't exist. Everything was immediate and transparent. Perhaps that's reason enough for a soul to prefer this realm over the chaos and confusion of ordinary life. 10. Drifting toward the Creator light. Soon, I sensed an even more radiant presence. If the first triad of lights had dazzled me, This was exponentially more awe-inspiring. An infinite brilliance, shimmering with an ultraviolet radiance I had never seen on Earth. To label this presence as God, source, or creator remains wholly inadequate, but those were the loosest approximations. Picture an orb so vast that whole constellations seemed to revolve within it. The angelic presences guided me closer, and I felt a surge akin to stepping into the ultimate guide to cosmic love. My entire being flooded with recognition. Paradoxically, I realized the boundaries between myself and this presence felt non-existent. It was me, and I was it, yet also distinct enough to observe its immensity. 11. Spontaneous life review of sorts. In many accounts, near-death experiencers mention a sweeping life review, a behind-the-scenes highlight reel of everything they've done. My sense of it was more intangible, a wave of knowledge that sparked immediate insight. I saw sequences from my life, particularly moments of hardship or confusion, but it came with absolute compassion. Each scene was enveloped by love, with no condemnation. If I wanted expert tips on how to interpret past mistakes, this realm gave me one fundamental principle: everything is simultaneously known, understood, and forgiven. That knowledge forms a core lesson many trending now spiritual teachers might call radical acceptance. In that plane of existence, it's simply the air you breathe. 12. Oneness and fractals. At one point, I felt a slight shift, like an internal pivot, revealing a tapestry of how everything there was interconnected. From the smallest flicker of light to the grandest orb, from these angelics to the triad that first greeted me, everything was part of one immense consciousness. We were fractals flowing into and out of each other, like droplets in a cosmic ocean. It made me recall best practices for team building in everyday life, except here it was universal synergy, an unimaginably harmonious coexistence. There was no tension, no hierarchy, only a perfect puzzle in which every piece mattered. 13. The dilemma: merge or retain self. Standing at the threshold of that enormous ultraviolet orb, part of me wanted nothing more than to merge entirely with it, to surrender all sense of separateness. Another part balked at the idea. This hesitation was a clue that my tie to physical existence wasn't fully severed. Something from my earthly life still exerted a strong magnetic force. The angelic beings, sensing my confusion, gently reminded me that I was free to choose. They also hinted that if I returned to life, it wouldn't be a carefree existence. More tribulations and physical challenges lay ahead. They were transparent about it, delivering the news with something akin to compassionate seriousness. 14. Future suffering, future growth. This revelation wasn't entirely unexpected. My body had endured relentless trauma already, so returning to it presumably meant picking up those burdens, plus any new lessons the soul had committed to learning. The cosmic beings conveyed that I still had soul contracts, or karmic threads, incomplete on Earth. If I resumed my life in that body, I would indeed face further trials. They showed me a condensed bullet point preview of upcoming difficulties: physical pain, emotional turmoil, and the slow process of coaxing my battered form back toward health. However, I also sensed an underlying message of hope. If I could persevere through the adversity, a profound sense of purpose awaited me, a contribution to collective healing, a role in uplifting others who suffered similarly. 15. The auras of two future presences. Around this time, my awareness latched onto three distinctive lights that emerged, one blaring bright and artificial in tone, and two glowing with softer, gem-like colors. The jarring, harsh light seemed close to a synthetic yellow, reminiscent of standard Earth-based medical lights. The other two were a soothing green and a deep indigo, exuding a resonant warmth that pulled at my heart. It felt almost as if I wanted to hold them. Initially, I didn't grasp the significance, but I was drawn to them. Later, I would come to understand that these two jewel-toned energies were the auras or vibrations of my prospective children, though at that time I had no concept of them. It was as if, within that cosmic dream, I sensed the seeds of future relationships, future life, and future guardianship. 16. Why they mattered. Looking back, I see how these energies functioned like silent ambassadors. They quietly reminded me that going back to Earth meant more than just personal suffering. It also meant forging new bonds, nurturing souls who would become integral to my growth. It's almost like a top 10 strategies approach to forging meaningful connections, but experienced in a swift, soul-level manner. I recognized their energy. We knew each other on a level that transcended Earth's timeline. This intangible yet powerful link ignited an eagerness within me to return. Suddenly it made sense. My life wouldn't be simply a return to pain and medical strife. It would also birth new joy, new relationships, new adventures. 17. Preparing for re-entry. Thus, the scale tipped. The part of me that felt drawn to remain in that luminous field of universal love was overshadowed by a curiosity for what awaited me on Earth. I pictured the face of my family, wondered how they were coping, and even felt waves of emotion from them, though that's difficult to articulate. The angelic guides, responding with gentle empathy, affirmed that my decision was both brave and aligned with my soul's intended journey. They cautioned once more that human life would feel harsh compared to this realm. The transition would be abrupt, akin to diving into icy water after basking in a warm bath. But if I truly wished to return, all I needed to do was move toward that bright man-made looking light. 18. The moment of choice. In that dimension, making a choice is instantaneous. You don't mull over, is this the right career move? Or, should I second-guess myself? You simply intend, and the shift occurs. The next thing I knew, I was catapulted with stunning speed toward the harsh yellow glare. The smooth, comforting vibrations of the cosmic realm gave way to what felt like being squeezed through a needle's eye. Suddenly, I was inside my physical body. A flurry of sensations hit all at once: dryness in my mouth, piercing lights on my retinas, the beeping of medical monitoring devices. My eyes squinted and watered, struggling to process this sudden intrusion after my sojourn in that infinite realm. 19. Coming awake to human frailty. Overhead, a giant penlight seared into my pupils, giving me a jarring welcome back. Medical staff crowded around with expressions of stunned disbelief. They'd been checking my eyes for any sign of pupillary reflexes, trying to gauge changes in brain function. I had been declared brain dead, or at least near enough that no one held real hope. Then, in a split second, I responded. My eyelids fluttered, my pupils reacted, and a flicker of consciousness returned. The staff snapped to attention, calling out for additional assistance. I recall feeling as helpless as a newborn, though a newborn with a battered adult body and swirling confusion. 20. Spontaneous healing, lingering challenges. In the days and weeks that followed, something baffling occurred. All those autoimmune markers, the ones that had dogged me for years, began to vanish. My critical organ systems, once so fragile, started functioning at near normal levels. Doctors described it as spontaneous remission. They shook their heads, trying to frame it in conventional medical terms. Meanwhile, I recognized it as part of what those angelic presences had done to me, the warm infusion of cosmic love that seemed to have rewired my sense of self at every level: physical, emotional, and spiritual. But let's be clear, even though my organs improved, daily life posed a new set of hurdles. I woke up into a world that felt strangely unfamiliar. My mind had been expanded. The typical concerns and worries of everyday existence felt trivial compared to the infinite perspective I had touched. This disconnect triggered anxiety. I had been somewhere else, and that knowledge lingered. 21. Navigating the after effects. Reintegration was tricky. After a near-death event, countless individuals speak of feeling alone in the midst of loved ones. People are eager to celebrate your survival, but they can't fully grasp the cosmic shift that has taken place inside you. I was living a new normal. Simple conversations seemed challenging because language felt limited. The words I once used to describe everyday experiences now felt inadequate. Instead, I held an abiding sense that intangible energies danced behind everything, that life was a tapestry of frequencies, not just material objects. Any latest trends in pop culture or daily gossip seemed hollow compared to the grandeur I had just tasted. 22. Sharing the story, obstacles and breakthroughs. For a while, I didn't talk about my near-death experience openly, partially out of fear that others would dismiss it as hallucination or mental confusion following trauma. Yet, I couldn't ignore the persistent call to integrate what I had seen. Slowly, I found that journaling helped, sketching images of the colored lights, scribbling about how it felt to have no physical form, describing the extraordinary clarity of unconditional love. Over time, a small inner circle of people, trusted friends, spiritually open-minded family members, invited me to share more. Not everyone believed me, but some hung on every woe. Enthralled and inspired. I recognized that not only did I want to talk about it, but maybe I needed to. My story had the capacity to assist those grappling with grief, illness, or existential dread. 23. Distilling cosmic wisdom into daily life. How does one bring cosmic revelations into the daily grind? That was the question swirling each time I found myself waiting in line at the pharmacy or strolling the grocery aisles alongside other unsuspecting shoppers. There was a yearning inside me to proclaim, "This is all so much more beautiful than you realize." But I soon learned that random outbursts at the supermarket don't necessarily land well. So I quietly explored best practices for bridging these worlds, watching how spiritual teachers or philosophers approach the everyday. Step by step, I integrated small changes. I meditated on unconditional love. I practiced quiet compassion for strangers. I listened deeply to acquaintances who needed an ear, realizing that simply reflecting genuine empathy can be a viral hack for promoting emotional healing. 24. Revelations about the nature of consciousness. One of the biggest insights was how consciousness seems to operate independently of our physical form. My experience had proven to me that mind or soul or spirit, whatever you call it, remains coherent even when the body is incapacitated. While science might not fully confirm this yet, I had a personal vantage that was impossible to deny. This transformed my attitude toward death, drastically reducing fear. It also redefined my sense of purpose. If we are more than biological machinery, then we can co-create meaning on Earth with a deeper sense of security. We can also reframe events such as severe illness or adversity as part of a broader tapestry of growth. 25. The role of future souls, my children. Recalling the two jewel-toned lights that I had seen, I gradually realized they were connected to my life plan in ways beyond my comprehension. About 3 years after my near-death experience, I had my first child, whose presence felt intimately familiar, as if we'd hung out in the cosmic realm before. Later, I had a second child, just as I had glimpsed in that domain. Observing them grow and develop, I sensed the same vibrational pattern I first encountered in that celestial environment. They became a grounding influence, a living reminder that I hadn't fabricated any illusions. It was as if they carried a piece of that luminous dimension within them, guiding me to be more present and purposeful. 26. Paradox of being healed and still suffering. Even though I emerged from the coma physically stable, it didn't mean life was suddenly blissful. There were emotional and psychological aftershocks. My restructured perspective didn't always mesh seamlessly with everyday reality. I had to grapple with survival guilt. Why did I get to experience miraculous healing while so many others are left to endure relentless pain or pass away? Why was I chosen, so to speak, to glimpse that realm and return? Sitting with these questions was agonizing. Some nights I wept from sheer overwhelm, yet I learned over time that the notion of being chosen may not hold as much meaning in the cosmic sense. The entire realm I visited seemed to operate on unconditional equality. Perhaps every single person has their own path, their own revelations. 27. Testing newfound gifts. Post-near-death experiences often leave individuals with heightened sensitivities. Some say psychic abilities, others say empathic resonance. Whatever label fits, I started picking up vibrations from people around me. I'd sense emotions before they spoke. I could stand near someone and feel an intangible swirl of energy, as if I'd tapped into their internal landscape. Initially, this was disconcerting. I wondered if I was losing my mind. Then, I remembered the light language I had learned among the celestial beings, this direct, energetic communication. Maybe my mental filters were simply less guarded. Realizing that, I sought ways to adapt. I practiced easy methods, like visualizing protective fields around myself. I approached reputable sources for expert tips on how to harness empathic sensitivity without being overwhelmed. 28. The long road of integration. Doctors observed my physical healing with puzzlement, but soon the medical follow-ups diminished. Meanwhile, the internal challenge continued. Each day was like building a bridge between cosmic consciousness and mundane tasks. Driving a car, paying bills, talking to neighbors. Through trial and error, I devised my own tutorial for returning to a stable life. It involved grounding exercises, journaling, and mindful reflection on the near-death episode to keep its lessons alive. I discovered that immersing myself in the energies of nature, like walking barefoot on grass or soaking in sunlight, helped me recall the gentler frequencies I knew beyond. Over time, these practices formed a personal, ultimate guide for balancing extraordinary insight and ordinary life. 29. Deeper understanding of suffering. As the angelic presences had warned, suffering did reappear in my life. There were new heartbreaks, relationship struggles, and the grief of losing loved ones to disease. Yet, my vantage was altered. Rather than feeling victimized, I saw these incidents as puzzle pieces in a grand design that fosters soul evolution. That doesn't trivialize the pain. Impermanence and sorrow still sting. But there's an undercurrent of acceptance that reminds me, this too is part of the cosmic dance. I found there was a behind-the-scenes interplay between personal pain and collective healing, where each of us, through our struggles, can catalyze empathy in others. 30. Revisiting the moment of choice. Curiosity never left me about the exact moment I chose to return. I often reflect on whether I would have merged fully with that boundless light had I not glimpsed the future presence of my children and recognized the call to continue my earthly mission. There is no single definitive answer. The cosmic realm thrives on multiple possibilities. I sense this is why near-death experiences vary so much in their details. Everyone's path is shaped by individual readiness. Some see tunnels, some see gardens, some see religious figures. My personal cameo was the triad of lights, angelics, and a colossal orb of love, all merged under the vast umbrella of the Creator. 31. Mystical meetings and the highest frequency. One corner of my recollection focuses on the total saturation of love that is a hallmark in many near-death accounts. That frequency wasn't just an emotion, it was a state of being. Imagine love multiplied 1,000 times, then expanding further. It wasn't romantic or parental or platonic, it was all-encompassing. It gave me the abiding knowledge that all living beings are expressions of a single universal heartbeat. Holding on to that memory, I can approach daily tasks, cooking, cleaning, working, grounded in awe. I sometimes call it the trending now perspective on unconditional love, although it's hardly a trend that will fade. 32. Becoming a bridge for others. Once I felt strong enough to share my story broadly, I noticed how many individuals crave reassurance that life doesn't end with the body's demise. My experiences, though unique, offer parallels to ancient spiritual teachings, near-death testimonies, and even certain scientific inquiries into consciousness. Over time, I've been called to stand as a bridge for others, a living demonstration that renewed perspective can spring from total despair. This doesn't mean telling them how to believe or who to worship. Instead, I encourage them to consider that expert tips on spiritual well-being might simply revolve around unconditional acceptance, heartfelt presence, and a willingness to expand beyond conventional boundaries. 33. Empowering lessons for everyday living. Throughout my path, I've compiled top 10 strategies for daily thriving that blend human practicality and cosmic insight. These strategies incorporate basic self-care protocols like nutrition and rest, alongside intangible skills such as cultivating empathy or maintaining a meditative practice. I emphasize that none of it should be forced or dogmatic. If there's anything my near-death journey taught me, it's that genuine transformation can happen spontaneously when you trust your deepest resonance. One easy method I often share is breath awareness. taking purposeful, slow inhalations, recalling the shapeless, loving presence that once enveloped me. Another is mindful gratitude, focusing intently on any aspect of life that stirs appreciation, no matter how small. 34. How adversity can become training ground. In my darkest hours of physical pain, or while grappling with memories of trauma, I remind myself that these challenges can actually function as cosmic teachers. We might never watch a tutorial on adversity, but adversity itself instructs us in resilience, empathy, and humility. Because of my near-death experience, I view suffering as an impersonal force that shapes us, polishing away our rigid habits of thought until we rediscover the luminous core that unites us with creation. In the broad sense, adversity fosters unity among people, leading to communal acts of care and compassion. 35. Embracing the body as a holy vessel. When I first returned from my coma, I felt disoriented in my physical form. Once I realized that I had come back by choice, it changed how I perceived my body. This vessel, once riddled with sickness, was now an ally in my sacred mission. Sure, it had limitations, many of which I still had to manage, but seeing it as a divine instrument drastically reshaped my self-care. Instead of looking at doctors' instructions as chores, I approached them as best practices for maintaining a tool through which my soul could express light. That mindset shift proved crucial. It's not that it removed all frustration, but it layered the mundane tasks with significance. 36. The magic of stillness and presence. One powerful method I discovered for aligning with cosmic resonance is stillness. By setting aside time every day to rest in silence, I found I could gently bridge the gap between the infinite expanse I encountered and the narrower bandwidth of human senses. In that quiet, visions sometimes returned, fleeting glimpses of the colored lights or the ephemeral sense of those angelic guides whispering encouragement. This practice, easily overlooked in the hustle of daily obligations, became my anchor. I began to see it as the ultimate guide for reconnecting with my authentic core. Spending even 10 minutes a day in mindful presence can create a ripple effect that brightens other areas of life. 37. Confronting doubts and criticisms. Though many embraced my story, some reacted with skepticism, claiming near-death experiences are merely electrical anomalies in a dying brain. It's true that science can't yet measure or replicate every aspect of spiritual consciousness. Perhaps from a purely physiological standpoint, my brain projected illusions. However, the sheer clarity and transformative power of what I lived through can't be reduced to simple neuroscience, at least not in my experience. People are free to doubt, and that's perfectly okay. No single explanation suits everybody. Ultimately, the far-reaching impact on my psyche and my body, plus those subtle validations like my children's future existence, left me convinced that I had touched a realm beyond the standard physical dimension. 38. Continuing revelations. The work goes on. Even now, I continue to receive insights, especially during moments of profound rest or heightened empathy. Occasionally, I feel guided to share a gentle word with someone who seems to be struggling. At times, an intuitive nudge urges me to check on a friend or family member. It's nothing dramatic, no lightning bolts from the sky, but rather a quiet waterfall of compassion that flows from the same source I encountered in that ultraviolet orb. There's also a deepening sense that Earth itself is a living entity, humming with layers of consciousness. Feeling that interconnection changes how I treat the environment, from food choices to waste disposal. 39. Raising children in the light of this perspective. Motherhood has offered an entirely new sphere in which to apply these revelations. I watch my children with wonder, partly because I sense this cosmic familiarity with them. They remain living touches of the realm I visited. There are times they say something innocently profound, and I marvel at the glimpses of universal wisdom they carry. Parenting them has become a trending now life workshop, showing me how each soul has unique gifts, illusions, and callings. I strive to nurture their sense of wonder without stifling it with too many rigid doctrines. In a sense, I want them to keep that vibrational connection intact so they never lose sight of their eternal roots. 40. How I found grace in deeper suffering. Even after my near-death experience, other traumas emerged. Some days were so daunting that I wondered if my cosmic healing knowledge was just a fever dream. The difference was that I felt I had a hidden reservoir, a place within that was stronger and more loving than any of life's storms. Tapping into it wasn't always easy, but the knowledge that it existed brought a subtle confidence. Picture a viral hack for emotional survival. Whenever I felt despair creeping in, I recalled those angelic vibrations and simply breathed until I felt a gentle wave of warmth in my chest. That gesture, modest as it sounds, often soothed me enough to keep going. 41. A message for others seeking hope. If there's one overarching insight I wish to impart to anyone reading or listening, it's that you are eternally cherished. Feeling flawed or broken is part of the Earth game, but it's not the ultimate truth. There's a dimension of consciousness where your essence is understood completely and embraced without reservation. That's the place I glimpsed, and I believe that same cosmic love is accessible in quiet, luminous moments here on Earth. Perhaps it emerges when we support a sick friend, or spend time in nature, or lose ourselves in the act of selfless service. Each small act of compassion is a microcosm of that infinite realm. 42. Remembering the angelics and their support. From time to time, I still sense those luminous guides around me, especially during states of receptive calm. They taught me that no one is truly alone. For those moments when sorrow or anxiety threatens to swallow you, call to mind the possibility that you are accompanied by compassionate energies far beyond the confines of everyday awareness. You don't need a near-death event to connect. Expert tips for forging that bond range from prayer and meditation to creative expression, or simply gazing at the sky and recognizing your oneness with the cosmos. 43. Integrating the lessons in physical care. Even though I walked away from that coma spontaneously healed, I still practice vigilance with my body. I maintain a healthy diet, stay active, and follow up with checkups. But the big difference is that I no longer view these steps as purely mechanical. They are sacred acts of self-honoring, top 10 strategies for health, if you will. I see them as aligning my body with the cosmic blueprint I touched. Instead of feeling pressured or anxious, it feels like an act of devotion to the vessel that houses my consciousness. 44. Connecting with others who've shared an NDE over the years, I've interacted with various communities of near-death experiences. Collectively, we share certain themes, a sense that love underlies all creation, a recognition that consciousness transcends bodily death, and an eagerness to live more compassionately. Each person's story is unique in its sensory details. Some see a tunnel, others a great field, others hear music, still others meet familiar faces who have passed on. Beneath the imagery, however, is the same luminous truth. We step into a realm defined by pure love, and then have the freedom to return for reasons that often revolve around continued learning and service. 45. Revelations about eternity and time. One takeaway that still boggles my mind, the notion of time in that cosmic dimension. Those 3 or 4 days in an earthly hospital bed translated into an experience that felt infinite. I sometimes consider how that might reshape our approach to deadlines and time management on Earth. While we do need schedules and routines, we might hold them more lightly if we recall that time itself is fluid, not the absolute authority we often make it. This perspective fosters a deeper sense of serenity when facing life's frantic pace. 46. Teaching others through story. Occasionally, people ask me for a tutorial on crossing into the other side without the traumatic route. While I can't provide a surefire method, I do share that contemplative practices, long-term meditation, immersive prayer, or breathwork techniques can gently thin the veil between here and there. Many mystical traditions hold that intentional discipline can replicate mild glimpses of the near-death dimension. Still, it won't be identical. The sudden snap of stepping out of your body due to catastrophic medical collapse is, in many ways, a harsh but profound teacher. It's better to explore gentle, easy methods that lead you to self-discovery rather than seeking crisis. 47. A deeper look at karmic threads. Coming back to the concept of soul contracts. I've spent significant time studying how the idea of karma, or purposeful challenges, interweaves with free will. If I were to craft a best practices list for navigating karmic lessons, I'd include openness to growth, willingness to forgive, both self and others, and gratitude for incremental steps forward. The cosmic realm taught me that all experiences can yield insight, especially the painful ones. This perspective helped me release resentment I once harbored about my medical condition or earlier life traumas, redirecting me toward a gentler path of self-compassion. 48. How the lights guide me still. Sometimes, in the quiet edges of dawn, I revisit the memory of those colored lights: ruby, amethyst, emerald. Their warmth still pervades my consciousness. I picture them swirling around me, resting upon my formless self, and it reminds me that I'm never without spiritual support. Conversely, if I feel anxious about an upcoming health screening or blood test, I transform that worry by recalling the unwavering acceptance I felt in that domain. To me, these celestial lights remain living presences, akin to beloved companions. 49. Embracing a cosmic yet earthly purpose. No matter how immeasurably grand that realm of love was, I understand now that I chose human life for a reason. The rawness of physical incarnation helps the soul mature in ways that pure spirit realms cannot. Imperfection drives us to yearn for growth, to create bonds, to unravel illusions. In the cosmic perspective, we might play out these incarnations like ephemeral acts on a boundless stage. Yet for all the pain and fear, there's also laughter, creativity, relationships, and those fleeting glimmers of the extraordinary embedded in the ordinary. 50. Contemplating the nature of divinity. Throughout my experience and the aftermath, I gleaned that the cosmos pulses with an intelligence that defies neat categorization. Some identify it as God, others as the source, or the universe itself. Certain mystics prefer the term the absolute. It doesn't particularly matter what label we choose, this presence remains the same. My direct encounter exposed me to a kaleidoscope of aspects: stars, angelics, swirling luminous beings, and a culminating orb that overshadowed everything else. Each manifested an aspect of the divine that might resonate with different souls, like facets of the same jewel. 51. Allowing the soul to grow through choices. Reflecting on those moments of decision, whether to merge with the Creator fully or to return to my body, demonstrates the power of free will. That alone impacted how I now see daily choices. We might underestimate the significance of each moment, but each crossroads is a subtle reflection of the cosmic freedom we possess. This doesn't mean we won't face predestined events or karmic patterns. Rather, it's a dance where destiny and free will intertwine, offering endless possibilities for expansion. 52. Harnessing the memory for consistent inner peace. One of the greatest blessings I retained is a deep-seated tranquility. Yes, anxiety tries to derail me. Yes, heartbreak can grip me. But beneath these waves is an oceanic calm that was born from being immersed in unconditional love. It's a refuge that stands outside fleeting mood swings. If someone asks me for a how-to on cultivating that calm, I suggest gently recalling a time when you felt an undeniable sense of peace or belonging. Maybe listening to a favorite piece of music or standing under a vast starry sky. Hold that memory in an unbroken stream of attention, let it envelop your body, and watch as your breathing slows. It's not a perfect substitute for a near-death experience, but it can usher in a slice of that cosmic serenity. 53. Revising my personal definitions of life and death. Before this, I saw death as a final full stop. Even if I had spiritual beliefs, I never felt them with such immediacy. Now, I recognize that death is more like a doorway or shift in focus. If the essence of a person can continue so vividly beyond the boundaries of a failing body, then the entire narrative around mortality transforms. This knowledge fosters compassion for those confronting the end of life. Instead of perceiving them as being overtaken by darkness, I feel they are stepping into that realm of light, possibly encountering revelations of their own. 54. Broader implications for humanity. We live in an age bursting with latest trends on mindfulness apps, yoga retreats, and holistic therapies. I suspect these are partial reflections of a heightened planetary longing for deeper truths, like an unconscious hum, calling many to remember their cosmic roots. I wonder if a critical mass of individuals who experience or believe in near-death accounts might accelerate global empathy. Maybe as more people attune themselves to the inside-out perspective, we'll witness a shift where unconditional love shapes policies, communities, and personal decisions. 55. How synchronicity intensified. Following my near-death episode, synchronicities increased. I'd think of someone, and moments later, they'd call or text. I'd stumble upon random articles discussing precisely the spiritual nuance I was contemplating. Dreams offered messages that aligned with real-life scenarios. Initially, I chalked it up to coincidence, but the frequency and specificity of these events grew. It's as if the walls between my inner and outer worlds became more permeable. This phenomenon might be the ultimate guide to understanding that consciousness interplays with reality far more dynamically than we assume. 56. Growing an attitude of service. Prior to my crisis, I often viewed helping others as optional, something to do when convenient. After glimpsing the interconnectedness of everything, service became an organic impulse. Compassion arises more spontaneously. If I see someone struggling, I feel a gentle push inside me that reminds me we're all fractals of the same light. This has influenced my career choices, my relationships, and my day-to-day interactions. Paying kindness forward enriches me just as much as it might assist someone else. 57. Balancing human emotions with cosmic understanding. You might envision that a near-death experience yields perpetual bliss. That's not necessarily accurate. Though I carry a core of peace, I still face anger, frustration, annoyance, typical human feelings. The difference is, I can let them pass without identifying them as my entire being. I no longer see them as absolute definitions of self. Instead, they're passing weather patterns that drift through the sky of my consciousness. This vantage keeps me anchored in compassion for myself and others, aware that we're all grappling with changing emotional states. 58. Turning the page. Life goes on. Even as years separate me from that pivotal event, the memory remains vivid. Health-wise, I continue to thrive in ways that defy earlier medical predictions. I juggle responsibilities, raise my children, handle everyday stressors. But the near-death experience is etched like a watermark beneath all these daily tasks, quietly shaping my sense of purpose and perspective. Maybe that's the real gift, a second chance at living, but with eyes now open to the enormity and sanctity of existence. 59. Encouraging others to trust their experiences. When I encounter people who've had glimpses, either through meditative states, dreams, or near-death moments, I encourage them to honor what they experienced. Our society often dismisses the mystical. We're told to be rational, to ignore intangible realms. But from my vantage, those intangible realms are more real than the shifting illusions of physical life. I suggest people keep a personal record, a journal, paintings, poetry, anything that integrates the knowledge gleaned from beyond. Everyone's blueprint will be different, but the desire to preserve these truths in some form can be a lifeline when normal life feels cold or isolating. 60. Full circle and final reflections. At this stage, I feel I've woven a tapestry of what happened to me, weaving in expansions and details that convey just how profound and life-altering the experience was. From the meltdown of my organ systems, to the celestial greeting of colored lights, from the formless bond with an all-encompassing creator, to the abrupt re-entry under an obnoxious medical flashlight, every moment glistens with meaning. My saga is one of resilience and surrender, of trauma and triumph, of cosmic revelry and earthly grounding. Though it's impossible to replicate the near-death experience precisely as I lived it, I share these highlights and contemplations in the hope that it might spark a remembrance in anyone who listens or reads. Perhaps you felt a moment of indescribable beauty and wonder, a fleeting feeling that the world is bigger and kinder than it seems. That moment is likely a single thread tugging you toward the same realm I glimpsed, urging you to recognize a deeper unity behind the illusions that so often divide us. Our everyday reality might be overshadowed by conflict, heartbreak, or monotony, but we harbor an inner capacity to connect with something infinitely vaster. In the end, that to me is the fundamental tutorial or how-to behind the near-death phenomenon. To recall, in the midst of pain and confusion, who we genuinely are. Limitless consciousness, woven from the love that forms the stars. If you feel called to incorporate any of these revelations into your own journey, whether by adopting mindfulness practices, exploring intuitive healing, or simply reaching out to others with a more open heart, know that every little step resonates. It's all part of the same tapestry. And if you ever find yourself doubting or in despair, remember the luminous domain that rests just beyond our senses, waiting patiently to remind us of our shared origin in love. That is the story of how I died, and how, in the process, I rediscovered life. And though my old body initially carried many scars and limitations, the infusion of cosmic understanding gave me wings to soar far beyond what I believed was possible. Nothing can truly remain the same after touching that radiant frontier of consciousness. The ramifications continue even now. With each passing year, I integrate new layers of insight that circle back to the single, simple fact. We are much more than we've been taught, and existence is far more astonishing than we can imagine.